Today we're going back to 1973 with the trend-setting Olympus OM-1. By the end of the 1960s, the 35mm SLR had established itself as the camera to have. The consumer market had been gradually turning away from medium format, and although 35mm rangefinders were still popular, the big technological advances were mostly being seen in small format SLR design. A few companies, most notably Nikon, Minolta, and Pentax, had experienced tremendous success with SLRs during the preceding decade. Nikon in particular had pretty much won over professionals as well as enthusiasts with enough cash with their legendary F camera system. Asahi's popular Pentax Spotmatic series had developed a loyal following, and Minolta had its grasp on a good portion of the market share with their recently updated SR line with the SRT 101. So by the time 1970 rolled around, other manufacturers were eager to join the fray. The company that would ultimately become Olympus was established in 1919 as a manufacturer of microscopes. In the 1930s, they began producing camera lenses, and it's been said that not finding suitable buyers for those lenses led them to produce their own camera by 1940. I think that's sufficient evidence to say that they knew they had a good product, and the next couple of decades saw them produce a variety of great cameras. The Olympus pen became a household name for shooters of half-frame 35mm cameras. But it wasn't until 1971 that Olympus got into the full-frame 35mm SLR game with the fairly unremarkable Olympus FTL. The FTL used the rather standard M42 lens mount and appears to have been a camera release mainly to get Olympus's foot in the door of the 35mm full-frame SLR market. Because only a year later, in 1972, the FTL was abandoned and replaced by a completely new system camera, the M1. Lights, however, didn't take kindly to another company's camera being named M, so Olympus quickly renamed this the OM system, and the rest is history. This new system delivered a revolutionary contribution to the world of SLR design, but that contribution wasn't based on anything Olympus added, but more accurately what it subtracted, which was size and weight. Let's take a look at some of the OM1's contemporaries. Here we have the Nikon F with a photomic prism and the Canon F1. And just like other cameras of the day, these cameras are pretty big. So if Olympus hoped to win any shooting pros away from Nikon or Canon, a smaller, lighter camera might be just the way to go. Let's see just what the differences are. A Nikon F mounted with a photomic finder, a 50mm 1.4 of that era, tops the scale at 1.1 kilos. A similarly outfitted Canon F1 tops out at 1.2 kilos. A similarly outfitted OM-1, however, weighs in at just 726 grams. And also consider that the body and available lenses were significantly smaller, and you have a very unique system for that time. Besides the weight and size savings, Olympus provided a couple more reasons to choose their SLR: viewfinder brightness and magnification size. When you first pick up an OM-1, you notice how small and light the camera is. But when you put it to your eye, that's when you say, I want one of these. The OM-1 viewfinder provides you with one of the largest and brightest images you can find. Combine that with the standard split image micro prism screen and you have a recipe for near perfect focusing. The OM-1 sports a mechanical shutter covering speeds from 1 to 1/1000th of a second. And the way you control these speeds is something else that Olympus approached differently. The shutter speeds are controlled by a ring that surrounds the lens mount. Now the OM-1 wasn't the only camera to feature this method. The Nikkormat cameras as well as many of the leaf shutter SLRs of the day did this too, but implementing this method of control allowed Olympus to keep the size down. The dial on the top plate, where you'd normally find the shutter speed dial on other cameras, is used for film speed selection. And most of the OM system's Zuiko lenses sports an aperture control ring at the front of the lens. Since the lenses are relatively small, this placement makes it very easy to control, and this arrangement lets you adjust shutter speed and f-stop with your left hand. Determining exposure on the OM-1 is by a single needle TTL cadmium sulfide base metering system powered by a PX625 1.3 volt mercury battery that you can't get anymore, but you can get replacements, so don't worry. In the viewfinder, you'll see the meter needle to the lower left. It swings up and down between the plus and the minus markings, and the correct exposure will put the needle in between the two. And as you probably notice, the viewfinder is quite uncluttered. Besides the tiny exposure indicator, there's not much else there except the microprism collar. It's the polar opposite of today's DSLRs and mirrorless cameras. The camera's designer, Yoshihide Maitani, believed in minimalist design, and I think that's evident in no better example than this viewfinder. The OM-1 comes standard with a PC socket to connect external flash and lets you choose between X and FP sync. A prism-mounted hot shoe wasn't standard issue for many cameras of this time period, and the OM-1 here is no exception, but it addresses this problem in a relatively unique way. Olympus offered a simple and cheap way to add one to the camera through use of this prism-mounted mini jack. The hot shoe screws right into a jack in the top of the prism, and you're ready to go. The camera also features a mirror lockup and self-timer. And yet another unique feature, in order to rewind a roll of exposed film, you would usually reach for the film release button on the bottom plate of the camera. Except on the OM-1, that button is a lever on the front, right above the self-timer, which is super useful if you've got the camera on a tripod and wouldn't normally be able to get to the rewind button. The original OM-1 wasn't designed to accept a motor drive, but Olympus quickly went to work and corrected that oversight, which resulted in the OM-1 MD, basically identical to the plain OM-1 but motor drive capable and sporting the MD badge on the front left. So it's time to take this camera out for a spin. Today I'm headed to downtown Carrollton with some rolls of Kentmere 100 and Tri-X. So let's head out. So I'm out here with the Olympus OM-1 camera. We got loaded up with Tri-X. Got a roll or two to shoot today. Out on the Carrollton Greenbelt, which is a jogging, cycling trail that goes around the city. It's pretty nice. It's a good day out here. It's nice and cool-ish. Fall is upon us, and I'm sort of glad that's here. Hopefully we'll get some leaves changing color in the next couple of weeks, but that's not going to matter today because I've got Tri-X black and white. So I can't seem to pass up a nice bench that looks a little weathered and has texture. So definitely get a couple shots out of this. I've got the 50mm 1.4 on right now. Like I said, I've got Tri-X. Let me make sure I set that film speed correctly. Good catch there. All right, let's see. I'm gonna set the shutter speed at 1/125th of a second. And I'm going to shoot, not wide open, but close. All right, so in that case, I'm going to shoot at 1/1000th of a second at f2.8. Let's do 5.6. 5.6 at 1/250th of a second. Again, slightly different angle. Now, since I've got some brighter areas in the background, I'm going to overexpose this a stop. And the sun went behind, that's fine. Got a nice leaf through here. Let's do a frame within a frame here. That's at 1/125th of a second at 5.6. Let's go 1.4 and see what we can get. Might be too much out here. Yeah, let's see. So 1/500th of a second at 1.4. That's not gonna work. That's going the wrong direction. Let's go 1/1000th of a second at 2.8. So one thing about this camera, there's hardly any exposure information inside. All you have is a needle that points to plus, minus, or in between. There's no shutter speed information in. There is no f-stop information in there. So I keep having to pull my eye away and look. So that's sort of a pain, but I don't think it's a deal breaker, but it is sort of out of the way to have to keep taking your eye away to see where you've got the camera set. Looks like we've got some nice subject matter here. We got this nice rusty spot here. We've got an old wrench. Got some spider webs. I like it. Just my style. I'm going to shoot at f5.6 and see what sort of shutter speed I get with that. All right, 1/1000th of a second is obviously not going to do that. Let's tell me 1/30th of a second, 5.6. Let's do 1/60th of a second at f4. I like this angle. Let's open up all the way, not all the way. Let's go f2 and see what sort of shutter speed we get. f2 at 1/250th of the second. I focus on this leaf that's right there in the middle. And another just for good measure. Got all this texture right here. Same exposure. 1/250th of a second at f2. Cool. This is a nice angle here. Oh, I really like this. All right, that's the same exposure. 1/250th of a second at f2. Let's go 1/60th of a second at f4. Also close down to 5.6 because the meter was telling me somewhere right in the middle of that. All right, so 1/60th of a second at f2. You know, I like finding things like this, where you could just about shoot an entire roll of film on this, which is probably a good assignment to do, you know. Pick one subject. Oh, even pick one lens maybe. One subject, one lens, shoot the entire roll over that. I should start doing that. It'd simplify shooting. Would force a little bit more creativity. Can you force creativity? I don't know if you can. Probably not. Maybe it would fuel creativity. That's what I meant to say. All right, we've got some other stuff here. Let's shoot that. Man, I don't have any idea what this sort of equipment is. But any astute viewers, if you know, let me know. All right, so we are at f2.8 at 1/60th of a second. So I'm glad I brought 400 film out here. I want to put my wide angle on and get some of this. So I've put a 28 2.8 on. Yeah, I like that. All right, we are at f2.8 at 1/60th of a second. So now that I've got the 28 millimeter on it, I'm going to revisit this little area. And we can go f5.6 at 1/60th of a second. This viewfinder is so nice. It's huge, it's so sharp, and so clear. It's really a great viewfinder. All right, let's go f2.8 at 1/60th of a second. A couple of different framings of this. Nice little backlit tree stump here. Sun's coming out a little bit. Let's see, we'll stop down. Actually, I'm just going to increase the shutter speed, and we're looking at 1/125th of a second at f2.8. See what else we can find around here. So I'm at 1/125th of a second at f5.6. See what stop down that looks like. All right, I'm in pretty close. Let's go to f2. What will that give me shutter speed wise? Looking like 1/1000th of a second at f2. Check the depth of field. Not much. We'll see. So after changing the battery, I have decided to also change lenses. Surprise. My 135 2.8. There's some more machinery back over here in the weeds, and I'm not really keen on walking through all of that. So that's where a telephoto can come in handy. It's a little bit dark. This might be just a tad underexposed because it's telling me 1/125th of a second at 2.8. Let's go to 1/60th of a second at 2.8. Right, that's looking exposure-wise better. But can I hold it still enough? That's always the question. So surprise, surprise, I've changed lenses again. And guess what I've put back on? I've put the 50 millimeter back on. So people ask me a lot of the times, like, ooh, what kind of lens should I get? I got some money, I got Christmas coming up, a birthday or something. What should I ask for? What lens would be good? And I always tell them a 50 millimeter because it doesn't zoom, of course. It's not wide, it's not telephoto, but it is, I mean, it is really, it's almost perfect lens. There's so much you can do with it. You've got large maximum apertures, and it's just very capable and flexible in your shooting. Well, there's a little lock up there you can barely see. I think it'll look good with the 50. 1/60th of a second at f2.8. Maybe. Sure. 1/60th of a second at 2.8. When the leaves start changing, I'll need to bring some color film out here. so there's some ferns right there in the light. So we got some backlit here. All right, I'm gonna go pretty wide open. Let's go to f2. And at f2, we're looking at 1/500th of a second. Okay. This would be really much more impressive in color, but maybe I'll be surprised and it'll look awesome in black and white as well. Let's give it a little bit more depth of field. Let's go to 5.6 at, here I am trying to reach for those shutter speeds. All right, so 5.6 at 1/60th of a second. What sort of depth of field am I going to get with that? Too much. Let's go f4 then at 1/125th of a second. Let's check the depth of field there. Now let's try it. So we've got some benches out here, and some of these tables, benches, got these leaves on them. Definitely a picture in there. Right, so that's still giving me f4 at 1/125th of a second. That may be, I was gonna say that was gonna be too much depth of field, but no, I think that'll be okay. I think I will try some different apertures though. Let's go to f2. So f2 at 1/500th of a second. Now, the depth of field I'm getting with that is almost a zip. So top down, we're getting 1/500th of a second at f2. All right, f2.8 at, let's go f4 at 1/1000th of a second. 1/1000th of a second. And that was the end of the roll. Man, all right, went through that quick. Flip the little rewind lever on the front, not the bottom. All right, so that's 2 rolls of Tri-X down. Let's go do the processing and take a look at what we've got. So what do you think? I have conflicting feelings. First off, the size is just perfect. Olympus really nailed it on keeping the size and weight down. And that viewfinder is just magnificent. Big and bright and a joy to use to focus. But there are a couple of things that sort of annoyed me. And since I was just praising the viewfinder for size and brightness, I'll start with it. Having no information in the viewfinder other than a match needle for metering really bugs me. Having to take my eye away from the viewfinder to check shutter speed and f-stops got old. And the method for choosing a shutter speed, using the ring around the base of the lens, could be improved. The odd placement of the shutter control wasn't easy for me to get used to. It has 2 knurled handles, 180 degrees apart from each other, one on each side, and that's really the only place to grip it. And depending on which speed you've currently chosen, Those two handles can move around the lens mount, and you may have to move your hand around to find where they are. And again, there's no way to tell which speed you've chosen without taking your eye away from the viewfinder and checking it. Ditto for the aperture rings. I mean, they're easy to get to, but I just kept being annoyed that it didn't have any of that info in the finder. Other camera makers found ways to make that info visible. In any case, though, the OM-1 is fun to shoot for the most part. The size and weight make it so easy to carry around, and again, that viewfinder is nothing less than incredible. Maybe if I shot more with it, I could get used to its quirks and I'd be just fine, but it seems sort of unnecessary to have to do that, though. So, what do you think about the OM-1? I'd love to hear your comments, and also be sure to hit the thumbs up and leave a like. And consider subscribing. I've got a lot of good stuff coming up. So until next time, load up that film camera and get out there, because you're guaranteed to miss all those shots that you don't take. See ya.